Okay, now let's learn a few more other things about the status of your feature and API. So in normal scenarios, before useQuery, you need to have a different states, one for data itself, one for loading, one for error, and so on, okay? Lucky for us with useQuery, we don't have to do all that manipulation by ourselves. It's all given to us back in the useQuery hook, okay? So that's one other things we can access next to the data. And this is really helpful for us. First is less code. Second thing, performance enhancements, which means you don't have to set any states, which means less wasted rendering behind the scene as well. And of course, much more manageable and more easier to handle as well, okay? Now, let's access few status. Of course, the first thing we all need all the time is the loading. And you can handle that by a status called isPending, okay? And isPending, basically, it's just saying that the query has no data yet, okay? It's being triggered, but there is no data yet available, which means it's still doing something behind the scene, okay? And we can come here and say, okay, if isPending, you can do whatever your loading state is, spinner or whatever. I'll just do a div with loading status, okay? The other thing you can access also, of course, is the error status as well. And how you can do it, very easy and simple. We can just go and access another property from the useQuery return. So it's called isError. And I can come here, for example, and say, okay, if isError happened, then of course, whatever you have to do with your error management, display that screen or navigate them, I don't know, to some other page or display a pop-up or whatever. For me, I'll just display a message, say error occurred. And that's it basically. So very less code, very easy and very useful. Now, you can access also much more things. For example, for the isError, you can access also the error itself and access the message. And how you can do that, you can again go to useQuery return and access something called error, okay? And if error happened, then you can just display your error message too. So I can go error.message. And that display for me whatever message is coming from the backend regarding that error. Now there are also other status, it may be helpful for you for some scenarios. In our scenario today it's not, but there's something called also isSuccess, okay? So basically, is my query successful? Okay, let's say for example, you want to return a list of some items, and when it's finished and successful, then you want to do some other query after that. Okay, so isSuccess can be really useful for you. For us now, because we are only accessing the data, you're not doing any other things after we fetch our API, so there is no use for us in this one. Now let's say if you're not a big fan of booleans and you don't want to use isPending or isError, okay, there is something else you can use. Let me remove all this. I'll remove isError, isPending. There is another property we get back as well called status, okay, and that status is a string, okay, and it's pending string or error string or again success string, okay. So you can come here and say, for example, if your status is equal to pending, then we are loading, and if your status is equal to error, then error happened again. And same thing for success. I guess you can do something similar, which is if status equal to success, okay, then do whatever you want to do right there, okay. So this is another way again you can check the status of your queries without have to use actual boolean. I'm still preferred boolean, but of course people have different ways of writing their code and different ways to manipulate their comparison. But you have the two options here. Either you go with booleans or you can go with strings comparison as well. Now let me put back my booleans. I'm not very big fan of strings, maybe because I always do spelling mistakes, so I'm not very comfortable with that. Let me save this. Now, useQuery also gives us another property called fetch status, or another status again, and hope this doesn't get you confusing. So let's take it easy and one by one, and even still it doesn't make too much sense of you in your real-time applications. Then you'll get in scenarios when you really need it, and that time you realize, okay, yeah, I have that option, I can use it. So even if you don't get full grab of it, so don't worry about it, just be aware that something else is there about status. Okay, so the other status is called fetch status. And fetch status basically is just another property which gives us few other options, okay, to monitor our queries. The first one is fetch status if it is fetching. Okay, so I'll just copy and paste in screen for you and I'll comment it. Okay, so the first one, it is fetch status equal to fetching, and that's mean this the query is currently fetching. Okay, it is doing something behind the scene. The second one is that our fetch status is post. Okay, which means that our query want to fetch, okay, but it is post. It can be any reason, the network is not connecting, it can be anything. Okay, then the third one is called idle. Okay, and I'll paste it right there, and I'll paste it right here. Okay, and that means that the query is not doing anything at the moment, like we have currently our screen. If I go to my dev tool, you say it is in stale. Okay, and that means it is in idle. Even if I go here now and I say let's just display our status, I'll say fetch status, cancel log, and you can see it's idle at the moment. Okay, it just there, is not doing anything. Now, why this more status and two different type of status? It's just confusing. Well, the background refetch and the stale while calling some logic make all combinations for the status and fetch status possible. Okay, I'll give you a few examples. The first example, let's say a query it is in success status. Okay, you remember the one we said before is success. Okay, or you can access it through status equals success. So if your query is in success status, okay, you will usually be in the idle fetched status, but there are scenarios which could also be fetching. So if a background refetch is happening behind the scene, okay, so your query is successful, but it can be either on idle or fetching fetch status. Okay, and why? There is a scenario like, for example, your query for some reason is just refetching something behind the scene without you even know that. Okay, that's the first scenario. Another example is that a query that mounts also has no data will usually be in pending status. Okay, and fetching fetch status, but it could also be post if there is no network connection. I hope this understand. So we say here is pending means our query doesn't have any data yet. Okay, which means our query can be either in fetching status, means it's doing something, it's trying to fetch some API, some data from some API call, or it can be trying to fetch, but it's not able to do it because it is post. Okay, so these are tricky scenarios. You may not fall into them all the time, but just it's good to be aware of the difference between them. Just as a rule, keep in mind that the status or status gives information about data. So do we have any of it or not yet? Okay, that is what status about. For the fetch status, it gives you information about the query FN itself. Okay, is it running or not? Basically, that's the main difference between them. Okay, so stay tuned now, and I'll see you in the next video. We'll get more into details, and don't worry about the status if it's confusing. By the time you get hang of it. So next thing is now to learn about mutation.